Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie The Accountant, 2016, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. Sometimes, the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one yelling commands or brandishing a weapon. Sometimes, it's the one who says nothing, who watches from the corner, calculating variables with surgical precision, quietly keeping score in a ledger only he understands. Behind thick glasses, in perfectly pressed suits, beneath the hum of fluorescent lights and the flick of sharpened pencils, a quiet storm brews. This isn't the kind of story that invites you in with warmth. It doesn't coddle or comfort. It lures you, slowly, into a world of numbers and shadows, where every decision is a risk and every figure carries weight far heavier than it seems. It begins in a place that doesn't feel like a story at all. A plain office. An abacus. A child. The boy is different. His mind sharper, faster, wired in ways others don't understand. When the world around him spins with chaos, he anchors himself with logic, with structure, with patterns. But life doesn't bend to patterns. It breaks them. And when the boy's mind collides with a world that doesn't make room for difference, his journey splinters into something extraordinary. He grows up, and we meet him again, but he's no longer a child. Now, he's quiet, unassuming. A small-town accountant with impeccable books and even more impeccable habits. He prefers solitude. He speaks only when needed. And beneath the surface of his calm, beige life lies a vault of secrets. He's not just balancing ledgers. He's cleaning them, for cartels, warlords, arms dealers. His reputation in the underground world is a myth, a whisper. A ghost who solves unsolvable financial puzzles and disappears before the ink is dry. But then a legitimate job pulls him out of the dark. A robotics company. A discrepancy in the books. A mistake worth millions. On the surface, it seems simple enough, an audit, a trail of numbers to follow. But he sees something else. Patterns. Inconsistencies. A web of hidden accounts and falsified transactions. And soon, the job unravels into something much more dangerous. People start dying. The truth starts burning through the silence like a fuse inching toward dynamite. The one who brought him in, an earnest young accountant herself, full of warmth and a nervous smile, suddenly becomes a target. She doesn't understand why, but she knows enough to be afraid. And when the man who was once just her quirky colleague reveals himself as something much more lethal, she realizes she stepped into a storm far beyond her understanding. Because he doesn't just do math. He handles weapons like extensions of his own body. He plans escapes with the precision of a computer. He dismantles threats with cold, unflinching logic. And as the bullets begin to fly and the bodies begin to fall, the question shifts from what is he doing? To who is he really? Pieces of his past begin to surface. A military father who believed emotion was weakness. A childhood marked by violence and discipline. A bond with a brother built through fists and scars. A moment in prison where a mentor, another man forgotten by the system, taught him how to survive in a world that eats people like him alive. And perhaps most painfully, a moment of near connection with someone who saw through the numbers, through the silence, and recognized something human buried underneath. The plot coils tighter with every reveal. A government analyst tracks him, following breadcrumbs across continents. A hitman, smirking, brutal, strangely philosophical, moves through the shadows, cleaning up messes, growing increasingly curious about the accountant who won't go down. And at the center, the man himself, methodical and alone, trying to finish the job while staying one step ahead of everyone who wants him gone. But what makes this story truly gripping isn't just the gunfire or the cryptic revelations, it's the emotional wire running through it all. The longing of a man who's built his entire life to avoid connection, now confronted with someone who might actually understand him. The ache of a past that never really lets go, no matter how many names he buries or how many new aliases he assumes. The fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he isn't doomed to be alone forever. And then, just when you think you've pieced it together, the twists begin to hit. A betrayal from inside the company. A government link that turns out to be deeply personal. A final confrontation that redefines everything we thought we knew about loyalty, about identity, about what it means to protect the ones we love, even if we have to do it from behind a wall of silence. The climax doesn't explode in the way you might expect. It unfolds like a puzzle solved, each piece snapping into place with terrifying clarity. When the final shot is fired, it's not just an end, it's an answer to a question that's been echoing quietly since the beginning. Who is this man? He's more than numbers, more than violence. He's a paradox, a protector shaped by pain. A man who doesn't fit into the world he's trying to save, but who saves it anyway, quietly, from the shadows, one calculation at a time. And somewhere out there, behind another false name and another blank office door, he's still doing the math. Still watching. Still waiting. Because order matters. Because details matter. And because in a world ruled by chaos, sometimes the quietest man in the room is the one holding everything together. There's something disarming about him at first. His movements are meticulous, deliberate, almost mechanical. His voice is steady, measured, with just enough inflection to pass through the fabric of small talk. He wears pressed shirts, soft neutrals, a pair of thick glasses that frame sharp, observant eyes. In another life, he might have been invisible. The kind of man who files your taxes and sends you on your way with a quiet nod. But that's only the surface. Beneath it, something colder pulsates working out of a small strip mall office under the name of a nondescript accounting firm. His workspace is minimal, clinically neat. Ledgers, spreadsheets, legal pads, and pencils sharpened to deadly points. Everything in its place. Everything balanced. Clients come and go, mostly farmers, blue-collar types, simple men with simple books. But now and then, something more interesting appears. A client whose books can't be touched in public. Someone who needs their secrets scrubbed clean. This man can handle numbers. No, he owns them. He doesn't just balance books. He sees into them. Finds patterns no one else can. Discovers what's hidden beneath rows of figures and equations like a detective trailing footprints in a snowstorm. He is exact. Controlled. But there are cracks. Small ones. A voice on the phone we never quite see. A mobile trailer hidden in a storage unit filled with art, gold bars, and weapons. A flash of strobe lights and shaking hands. Pills lined up with surgical precision. And something older, buried deep, a childhood shaped by a mind that couldn't bear disorder and a father who refused to accept fragility. The story begins shifting as we drift back into that past. A young boy, maybe 9 or 10, sitting at a table with a complex puzzle in front of him. Around him, others fidget, scream, cry, children with autism, each with their own rhythms and needs. But this boy isn't overwhelmed. He's locked in, absorbed, solving patterns like breathing. The staff is amazed. His parents watch with varying emotions. His mother, full of love but fraying, wants help. His father, rigid, military, unbending, refuses weakness. He demands strength, demands control. And so, the boy is pushed into training. Martial arts, combat readiness, toughness at all costs. Back in the present, the man is approached with a new job. A legitimate one. An opportunity to audit the books of a cutting-edge robotics company that's noticed something unusual in its financials. The offer comes through an intermediary, an older man with government ties who seems nervous but respectful. It's clear this isn't just any accountant. There are forces behind him, watching, using him when needed and letting him vanish when they don't. He accepts the job. At the company, he meets Dana. She's younger, sharp, working in-house as a financial analyst. She's the one who found the inconsistency, a string of unbalanced entries buried deep in years of data. She doesn't know what it means yet, but she knows enough to be afraid of what might be hiding underneath. There's an awkwardness between them at first. He's strange, brilliant but strange. Doesn't make eye contact. Doesn't smile. Speaks in clipped, literal sentences. But she doesn't mock him. She leans in. She tries to understand. And he notices. They spend days combing through financials. Pages and pages of records spread across conference tables. He works through the night, scrawling equations on whiteboards until the room looks like the inside of a genius's mind. He mutters to himself, taps his fingers in staccato rhythms. And then, suddenly, he finds it. The breach. The lie. It's buried beneath layers of fabricated transactions, spread thin across years to avoid attention. Money diverted. Accounts faked. Someone has been siphoning funds, and not subtly. Millions have disappeared. And the person responsible? It isn't who you'd expect. It isn't the CEO or a board member. It's someone further down, closer to the data, someone who knew how to hide in the open. But then, before he can finish his work, before the report can be handed in, someone intervenes. The job is shut down. Quietly. No warning. He's told to stop digging. The company acts like everything is resolved, like they're satisfied. But he knows that's a lie. And when one of the company's executives turns up dead in an apparent suicide, the lie begins to unravel. At the same time, a parallel story is taking shape. Inside a government office, an analyst named Ray King is following a different trail. King is a bulldog, experienced, sharp, tired. He's spent his life chasing ghosts through forensic accounting records. And now, as his retirement looms, he wants to solve one last case. He's been tracking a mysterious figure for years, an accountant who surfaces briefly in connection with some of the world's most dangerous organizations and then disappears. No fingerprints. No real name. Just whispers. King recruits a young analyst named Mary Beth Medina. She's reluctant, cautious, but brilliant. He threatens her into helping him, holding her past over her head like a leash. But beneath the intimidation is something else, a strange respect, a belief that she can help him find this ghost. And together, they begin connecting the dots. The murders. The financial records. The whispers of a man who seems to fix problems no one else can fix. And all of those paths begin to point to the same place. Back at the robotics company, Dana is now in danger. Someone knows she saw the same patterns. Knows she talked to him. And just as the net begins to tighten, the quiet accountant who once seemed awkward and detached reveals a new layer, one built not on spreadsheets, but survival. Because he is not just a man who balances numbers. He is a man who prepares, who trains, who executes. In a sequence that unfolds like a sudden storm, we see what he's capable of. In his trailer, weapons are laid out like tools. A sniper rifle. A Glock. Knives balanced with precise weight. He doesn't panic. He plans. He moves through danger like it's a formula. A home invasion meant to silence him ends with bodies on the ground. The attackers are professionals, but they're no match. He kills without rage, without hesitation, as if flipping a switch. But he doesn't run. He finishes the audit, delivers the truth to the company, knowing full well that doing so places him in the crosshairs of the very people who hired him. Because that's who he is. He finishes what he starts. Always. No matter the cost. And somewhere, beneath the layers of habit and control, he's beginning to feel something stir. Something he hasn't felt in a long time. The beginnings of a connection. To Dana. To the idea that maybe there is more than just survival. That maybe he doesn't have to live in the margins forever. But the world doesn't care about hope. Not when there's blood to spill. And as more pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place, as the government inches closer, as the body count rises, a larger story begins to take shape. One that reaches back into his childhood. Into the violent philosophy of his father. Into a decision made long ago, to train a boy who didn't fit, not to survive despite his difference, but because of it. The storm hasn't fully arrived yet. But it's coming. And when it does, it will test everything. His skills, his beliefs, and the fragile, flickering light of something almost like love trying to survive in a world built on silence. The shift happens quietly. A turn in the atmosphere. The kind of moment that doesn't announce itself, but you feel it just the same, like the sudden absence of birdsong before a storm. He's still moving through the world with the same quiet calculation, still dressing in subdued suits and muttering numbers beneath his breath. But the heat is building now. The walls are starting to close in. And even he knows there's only so long you can walk through fire before something begins to burn. The murders haven't gone unnoticed. The robotics company pretends things are back to normal, but behind the glass walls and smiling executives, panic has set in. Dana, rattled by the death of the executive who first approached her, begins to sense she's next. She doesn't know why, or by whom, but she knows something isn't right. And when the man she barely understands suddenly reappears, not in a boardroom, but in the middle of the night, with urgency in his eyes and a gun tucked beneath his jacket, she realizes just how deep she's wandered into the unknown. They don't have long. He's already being hunted. The group pursuing him isn't clumsy or amateur. These aren't mercenaries looking for a quick payday. These are professionals. Trained. Precise. Led by a man with a charm that feels too smooth to be real. Braxton. He's all smiles and shrugs, until he isn't. He leads a small, lethal team, each member with a role, a specialty, and no moral compass. They're not chasing money. They're cleaning up loose ends. And he's the biggest one. But he's not running. Not yet. He takes Dana with him. Not out of sentimentality. At least that's what he tells himself, but because she's marked. Because she doesn't deserve to die for spotting a mistake. And as they move together, through anonymous motels, quiet roads, back exits, something begins to form between them. Not romance. Not quite. Something stranger. Mutual understanding. She begins to see how his mind works. The way he calculates risk. How he remembers every number, every step. How his life is governed by routine not because he loves it, but because it's the only way he can breathe. She sees the scars, too. Not just the physical ones. The moments of overstimulation. The rituals he needs to sleep. The rage that sits just beneath his calm, like a trapped animal. But she also sees the goodness in him. The rules he follows, even when no one's watching. The code that drives him. The man who never leaves a job unfinished. Meanwhile, Medina and King have put the pieces together. The ledger. The trail of financial anomalies. The whispers of a man who doesn't just audit books, but lives between the cracks of the world. Medina is the first to realize the deeper truth, that this isn't just about numbers or bodies. This is about survival. About a man who's built his entire existence around a singular purpose, to function in a world that never made room for him. And slowly, the backstory begins to surface, not through exposition, but through memory, woven into the present like static between radio stations. The boy, tormented by noise, light, touch. The father who dragged him around the world, teaching him how to fight, how to shoot, how to survive pain. The brother who stood beside him, learning the same lessons, growing into a mirror image shaped by different choices. The mother who couldn't stay, whose absence still stings like an old bruise. But the most formative moment of all comes years later, in prison. It's there that he meets Francis Silverberg, a mob accountant with a brain like a safe and the charm of a broken saint. Silverberg teaches him how to see the world through financials, how to track behavior through bank statements, how to decode lies through tax records. And in return, the boy protects him, defends him, learns from him. By the time he leaves, he isn't just a fighter. He's something much more dangerous. A weapon disguised as a file clerk. Back in the present, the layers continue to peel back. The robotics company wasn't just hiding embezzlement. It was hiding something darker, a plot to inflate its value before a public sale, falsifying its growth, betraying investors and employees alike. The man behind it all? Not some faceless board member. It's Lamar Black, the same man who smiled his way through the early meetings, who welcomed the accountant with open arms. He's not just complicit. He's the architect. And now he's trying to erase the mess before it stains his future. Braxton, the enforcer, is tasked with making sure that happens. But something isn't right. There's hesitation in Braxton. A flicker of recognition when he sees surveillance footage. A tension that builds not just from the job, but from something older. Something personal. And when the final confrontation comes, when the accountant finally storms the compound with mathematical precision, dismantling guards with brutal efficiency, it's not just business anymore. It's personal. He faces Braxton alone, in a room full of glass and echoes. And the truth that bursts forth isn't shouted, it's felt. Braxton is his brother. The same boy who trained beside him. The same boy who took the same beatings. Who survived the same drills. But who emerged on a different path, chasing order not through numbers, but through violence. They've both been chasing the same thing all along, just on opposite sides of the ledger. The fight is fierce. Not just physically. Emotionally. Two lives torn apart by a father's obsession. Two minds shaped by trauma, trying to reconnect through fists and blood. And when it's done, when the dust settles, it's not triumph that remains. It's understanding. The brothers don't embrace. They don't cry. But something old and broken shifts. And maybe, just maybe, begins to mend. The fallout comes quickly. The story makes headlines. But the true players remain in the shadows. Black is exposed. Arrested. The company crumbles. Dana survives. And Medina, having learned the truth about the accountant's identity, chooses not to reveal it. She lets him go. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Because some ghosts deserve to remain unchained. In the final moments, he vanishes again. A new name. A new place. A child at a specialized school receiving a donation, anonymous, but meaningful. A painting, once stolen, returned. A trailer moving down a quiet road. He's not a hero. He's not a villain. He's something else entirely. A man who found order in a world of chaos. Who learned to live on his own terms. And as the screen fades, one thing becomes clear. He's still out there. Still balancing equations. Still finishing what others start. Not for glory, but because he must. He's the kind of man you walk past in a hallway without a second glance. Head down. Hands clasped neatly. A suit so ordinary it almost disappears into the room. But there's something, just beneath the surface. A tension in the shoulders. A rhythm in the way he speaks. Like every word has been weighed before spoken, every step rehearsed 100 times in his mind before his foot even touches the ground. That's how he survives. Not with bravado, but with control. Christian Wolff doesn't crave attention. He doesn't seek connection. He lives within the rules he's built for himself, rules that keep the world at arm's length. Wake at a precise hour. Take the same pills. Complete the same physical routine. A life trimmed down to clean lines and clear expectations, where variables are dangerous and deviation is a threat. But this is no mere eccentricity. It's structure born from necessity, from a mind that feels too much, that notices everything, that remembers what it would rather forget. What sets him apart isn't just intelligence. It's how he uses it. His gift is terrifying. He sees numbers not as static figures but as stories, patterns of behavior, trails of intent. Give him a ledger and he'll find the lie. Give him time and he'll expose the truth. But that brilliance doesn't exist in a vacuum. It comes from something deeper, a neurological condition that forces the world to come at him louder, faster, more intensely than most people can handle. Autism isn't a plot device here. It's the architecture of who he is, beautiful, painful, raw. But Christian was never given the chance to grow into that difference naturally. From childhood, he was shaped by his father, a military man whose love came wrapped in rigidity and whose comfort came only through discipline. When the world didn't make sense to his son, he didn't soften it. He hardened the boy instead, taught him to fight, to endure pain, to survive. He dragged him from country to country, instructor to instructor, forcing adaptation instead of understanding. Christian learned not only how to master numbers, but how to break bones. And that contradiction, violence and precision, became the core of his identity. He's a paradox, a man who cannot stand to be touched, yet chooses a profession that puts him in constant proximity to danger. A man who dissects financial corruption for the worst people in the world but lives by his own rigid moral code. He'll launder money for a cartel, but he'll punish betrayal without hesitation. There's justice in his silence, order in his wrath. And for all his calculation, for all his self-imposed distance, there's a quiet ache running through him, a loneliness that doesn't cry out for rescue but makes its presence known in the small things, in the way he sits slightly turned away from people, in the way he looks at Dana Cummings with something like wonder, curious, hesitant, as if she were the first person in a long time who didn't make him feel like a puzzle. He doesn't flirt. He doesn't charm. He notices. He listens. And that, in its own fractured way, becomes a form of connection. Dana is the first person to see past the mask. She doesn't push him, doesn't mock his quirks. She sees the brilliance, yes, but she also sees the humanity, the quiet bravery it takes to move through a world that was never built for someone like him. And though their bond never becomes romantic in the traditional sense, it's more intimate than most love stories. She offers him something he's rarely been given, understanding without agenda. Her character is more than just a device to pull Christian into the plot. She is his mirror, not in ability, but in vulnerability. She's sharp but anxious, eager to please yet underestimated. She talks when nervous. She fidgets with her clothes. She believes in what she does, even when no one listens. And when her world is shattered, when the company she trusted becomes a battleground, she doesn't collapse. She adapts. She fights. And in her resilience, Christian sees something worth protecting. But protection, in his world, is a dangerous thing. Because there are others hunting him. Others who know the cost of what he knows. Braxton, the enforcer, is Christian's foil. At first glance, he's everything Christian is not: loud, charismatic, emotionally fluid. He's a killer, yes, but one who seems to take pleasure in his work. He mocks. He laughs. He moves like a predator. But beneath that bravado is a man carrying his own weight of scars. Their confrontation is not just physical, it's emotional. Because Braxton isn't a stranger. He's family. The same boy who grew up under the same unforgiving father. The same fists. The same rules. And that twist, the revelation that the killer chasing Christian is his own brother, reshapes everything we've seen. Their paths diverged, but they were born from the same broken home. Braxton chose chaos as an answer to pain. Christian chose structure. But both were trying to make sense of a world that offered them none. Their final confrontation isn't a duel. It's a reckoning. They fight, yes, but the battle is layered with grief, regret, and a strange, unspoken love. There's no apology. No hug. Just a recognition that they both survived. And somehow, in that survival, found pieces of each other still intact. Braxton's cocky exterior cracks just enough to let vulnerability slip through. Christian, for the first time, softens without fear. Beyond the characters at the center are the ones pulling the strings, or trying to. Ray King, the Treasury Department director, is chasing a ghost. His motivation isn't noble, it's personal. He's looking for closure, for one final triumph before retirement. And in doing so, he uses Medina, a young analyst with her own secrets. Their dynamic is one of power and pressure. But Medina, like Dana, is not just a supporting role. She's observant, sharp, and more compassionate than her boss. When she finally learns the truth about Christian, she doesn't expose him. She lets him go. Not out of pity, but respect. Because she sees what he's really doing, bringing balance to a world that thrives on imbalance. Even Silverberg, the mob accountant from Christian's prison years, leaves an indelible mark. He's a ghost in the narrative, but a critical one. He gives Christian the tools to refine his mind, to wield his gift like a scalpel. Their unlikely bond is one of the few glimpses of mentorship, of warmth. When Silverberg is murdered, it isn't just a plot point, it's a loss. A rare connection, severed too soon. And then there's the voice. The woman on the other end of the phone. The only one who can reach Christian no matter where he is. We never fully see her. But we hear her, calm, steady, always guiding. She knows everything. Manages logistics. Sends messages. Offers him not just information, but companionship. The fact that she, too, is neurodivergent only deepens the film's quiet commentary. She's not his handler. She's his anchor. The film never makes a spectacle of Christian's condition. It doesn't use it for pity or inspiration. It presents it as truth. As part of who he is, not a weakness, but a lens. One that sharpens certain things and blurs others. And in doing so, it challenges the audience to see beyond labels. To recognize that strength comes in many forms. That heroism doesn't always look like a cape or a speech. Sometimes it looks like a man sitting alone, solving the world one number at a time. In a story built on ledgers and lies, Christian Wolfe becomes something much more than just a protagonist's a cipher. A weapon. A guardian. A child who was never allowed to be soft, who grew into a man defined not by his pain, but by how precisely he learned to live with it. And in the stillness of his world, where every sound is too loud and every feeling too sharp, he chooses, again and again, to do what's right. Not because it's easy, but because someone has to. There's something ironic about a movie that centers around cold numbers, clean ledgers, and methodical calculation, being filled, in its making, with a strange constellation of chance, intuition, and unpredictability. Because beneath the slick lines of suits and spreadsheets, behind the carefully staged action sequences and brooding silences, the film had a backstage full of quirks and stories that never made it into the final cut. And if you look closely, beneath the credits, beyond the bullet shells, you'll find that some of the most fascinating parts of the story were happening when the cameras weren't rolling. To start with, the man at the center of it all, Ben Affleck. On screen, he was stoic, surgical, measured. But behind the scenes, he was walking a tightrope between roles. At the time of production, he was deep in the world of capes and cowl. He had already stepped into the shadow of Gotham as Batman. And yet here he was, not in armor, but in pressed shirts, portraying a character who was far less superhero and far more human. In interviews, Affleck admitted that this role was one of the most complex he'd ever taken on. Not because of the physicality, he'd done that before, but because of the nuance. Portraying a man on the autism spectrum, a trained assassin, a genius accountant, and someone deeply emotionally isolated, all without turning it into a caricature, was a massive challenge. And it required preparation unlike anything he'd done before. Affleck worked with autism consultants to study behaviors, speech patterns, coping mechanisms, and routines. He watched countless hours of interviews and documentary footage, trying to absorb the subtleties of body language and sensory response. But what's remarkable is that he didn't want to portray autism in broad strokes. He didn't want a label. He wanted a person. The result was a performance layered with restraint and rhythm, where every blink, every glance, every pause held meaning. And yet, he said, the hardest scenes were the quietest ones. The action is easy, he told a journalist. It's the stillness that's hard. Speaking of action, one of the strangest and most surprising facts about the film is just how much of the choreography was real. The fight sequences weren't just designed for adrenaline. They were built on real martial arts techniques, particularly Indonesian silat. That's right. Instead of relying on the usual Hollywood blend of karate kicks and wide punches, the stunt team turned to a style known for its brutal efficiency and close-range disarms. Affleck trained intensely for months, working with experts to master not just the movements but the intention behind them. Every block, every strike was supposed to reflect the mindset of someone who fights only when he must and finishes fast. The most talked-about scene in terms of fight choreography was the one where Christian Wolf dismantles an attacker inside a house using nothing but his body and the furniture around him. The stunt coordinators later revealed that almost none of the scene was shot using doubles. Affleck performed the entire fight, move for move, hitting marks with the precision of someone possessed. His background as a director helped here. He understood the rhythm of a scene, how the camera sees momentum. But what made it really unusual? He choreographed his own transitions. In one shot, he slides a chair into position not for dramatic effect, but because he knew it would give him leverage in the next takedown. That level of detail is rare. And borderline obsessive. And then there was the trailer. No, not the promotional trailer. The actual trailer. Christian's mobile base, hidden away in a storage unit, filled with priceless art and military-grade hardware. The crew went all in on that design. Everything in it, from the Jackson Pollock painting to the rare comic books and untraceable cash, was placed with purpose. But here's the kicker. The art wasn't just decoration. Each piece was selected as a symbol of Christian's internal world. The Pollock, all chaos and color, represented the storm in his mind. The Renoir, tucked away carefully, was about connection. The original Action Comics #1, locked in a display case, was about dual identity, a nod to the superhero metaphors hiding just beneath the surface. Interestingly, many of those props were real. The Action Comics issue was a replica, of course, but the art? Some of it was loaned by private collectors. For a single shot, the production team borrowed a genuine Rothko painting, worth tens of millions, under the condition that it would be guarded like a state secret. Security on set that day was tighter than usual, not because of the stars, but because of the canvas hanging behind them. And while we're talking secrets, here's a little-known piece of trivia. The mysterious voice on the phone, Christian's handler, the woman who guides him from job to job, wasn't cast until after filming wrapped. The role wasn't written with a face in mind. It was a voice that had to feel both comforting and clinical. The final casting was done through blind voice auditions. They brought in dozens of actors, some with big names, others completely unknown, and played the voice tracks for Affleck. The one that struck him most wasn't flashy. It was calm, even, almost robotic. That became the voice of Justine, who would later be revealed in one of the film's softest and most surprising moments. Another strange truth? The film's biggest plot twist, the revelation that the antagonist, Braxton, is actually Christian's long-lost brother, wasn't part of the original script's earliest draft. The director, Gavin O'Connor, said that twist came late in the writing process. He wanted something that would raise the emotional stakes of the final showdown. The idea came during a late-night script session when the writers were trying to answer a simple question: what's the one thing that could make Christian hesitate in a fight? The answer: family. And so, Braxton was rewritten. Not just as a foil, but as a brother. The twist reshaped the entire second half of the film and gave the final fight sequence a new, tragic weight. And perhaps the most unexpected thing of all? The film wasn't expected to succeed. Warner Brothers kept their expectations quiet. It was a mid-budget thriller about a man with autism who moonlights as a hitman. Hardly the most conventional pitch. But when the movie released, it quietly exploded. Audiences connected with it in ways no one predicted. The box office topped $150 million worldwide, far beyond the modest $44 million budget. And it wasn't just the action that pulled them in. It was the heart, the math, the mystery. Word spread online. People shared their personal reactions, especially those within the autism community. And while there were mixed reviews about how accurately or responsibly the condition was portrayed, many praised the film for even attempting to center a neurodivergent character in a genre typically ruled by clichés. The fact that Christian's condition wasn't used to excuse or define him, but instead became part of his strength, struck a chord. During one Q&A session, a young viewer stood up and told Affleck, through tears, that he had autism and had never seen someone like him in a movie. Someone strong, capable, who could take care of himself. Affleck was reportedly speechless for several moments. Then he said, "That's why we made this. That's it right there." There were other quirks along the way, too. Like the fact that one of the set locations, a suburban neighborhood, had to shut down filming one day because a neighbor thought the crew's fake guns were real and called the police. Or how John Bernthal, who played Braxton, insisted on doing all his stunts and showed up to set with real bruises from training. Or how J.K. Simmons, who plays Ray King, improvised half his dialogue in certain scenes just to throw his co-stars off. His performance, full of weariness and wit, gave the movie unexpected moments of levity. Even the musical score had its own secret. Composed by Mark Isham, the score was written in odd time signatures, meant to mirror Christian's mind. Unpredictable rhythms. Offbeat transitions. Isham worked closely with the editors to make sure the score didn't follow the emotion of the scene, but lead it, subtly cueing the viewer into Christian's world. And yet, despite all of these strange and intricate details, the film never felt overstuffed. It stayed focused, grounded. It didn't try to be everything. It just tried to tell the story of a man who sees the world in numbers, and chooses, in his own way, to make those numbers count. A sequel was quietly greenlit. A series was teased. But even if none of that materializes, the original film stands alone as something rare, an action thriller with a mind of its own. Built not on spectacle, but on symmetry. And behind the math, the murder, and the mystery, there were just people, working quietly, obsessively, making sure that every detail, no matter how strange, added up. It doesn't take long, just a few scenes really, before you realize this isn't a typical action thriller. You see it in the stillness of his movements, in the deliberate way he closes a door or sharpens a pencil. You feel it in the pauses between words, in the flicker of discomfort that passes through his face when he's asked a question too casually. This is a film that unfolds not with explosions, but with quiet precision. A story built on moments of subtle weight. And when critics began to sit with it, really sit with it, they found themselves divided not because it failed to provoke, but because it refused to fall neatly into the categories they expected. One of the most pivotal scenes in the film, the kind that critics came back to over and over, takes place not with guns drawn or fists flying, but in a modest conference room. Christian Wolff has been brought in to analyze the financial records of Living Robotics, a tech firm growing faster than anyone can explain. He stands in front of a whiteboard, dry erase marker in hand, and begins to work. What follows is a montage not of gunfire or chase sequences, but of math, calculation, scribbles, connections. The music swells not to accompany action, but to echo the rhythm of a mind slipping into flow. It's hypnotic. And critics noted it. They recognized that this wasn't just storytelling, it was characterization. That scene, almost clinical in its structure, became one of the film's emotional cores. Because in it, we're not just watching a man do math. We're watching him live. For Christian, numbers aren't just work. They're sanctuary. They are the one place where nothing lies, where patterns lead to truth, and where control is absolute. In that moment, the film silently aligns the viewer with its protagonist, not by telling us who he is, but by letting us feel how he breathes. But not every critic saw it that way. Some viewed the film as confused in its tone, too many genres colliding, part character study, part assassin thriller, part financial drama. There was a discomfort with the central paradox, that a neurodivergent protagonist was portrayed not only as a brilliant mind, but as a deadly weapon. Was the film reinforcing stereotypes, some asked? Was it glamorizing violence through the lens of autism? Or was it something braver, a reclamation of agency, a refusal to reduce neurodivergent characters to victims or comic relief? Those questions pulsed through critical reviews like undercurrents. Some praised the film for giving its protagonist depth without pity, for letting him be dangerous, intelligent, flawed, lonely, and precise, all at once. Others found its portrayal of autism too generalized, too schematic, too neatly slotted into narrative convenience. But even among the detractors, there was an uneasy respect for the attempt. Because whether it hit or missed for them, the film tried. It reached for something complex, something rare. And that complexity showed itself in the structure of the story, particularly in its pacing. There's a moment, about halfway through, when the tone shifts. The investigation into the robotics company turns darker. A key executive is found dead. Not by accident. Not by coincidence. And just like that, the narrative pivots from intellectual curiosity to survival. The accountant, who once seemed like a peculiar side player, becomes something else entirely, a force. The reveal is handled with almost eerie calm. He doesn't react with anger or panic. He simply adjusts, pulls a gun from a hidden case, cleans up blood like it's part of the job. And that, critics noted, was the film's boldest decision. To portray violence not as spectacle, but as procedure. Christian doesn't revel in it. He doesn't threaten or taunt. When he eliminates a threat, it's clinical, measured, as if solving an equation. Some critics found that chilling. Others, quietly devastating. Because it raised a deeper, more uncomfortable question. How much of his calm is strength, and how much of it is a learned response to a world that never made space for him? The thematic layers continued to stack as more truths were revealed. When Christian's past is exposed, his childhood training, his military father, his fractured family, critics found themselves re-evaluating the story's emotional core. What had begun as a cool procedural became something more aching. Here was a man forged by two competing forces, a mind that couldn't process emotion in conventional ways, and a father who punished vulnerability. That combination created a protagonist unlike any other in the genre, not a killer molded by trauma, but a protector shaped by necessity. The scene that most encapsulates this, and that critics repeatedly return to, is the final confrontation with Braxton. It's not just the choreography, though that's impressive in its own right. It's the reveal. That the antagonist chasing him is his brother. That beneath the bruises and blades is a shared history of brokenness. The fight becomes a reckoning. Every punch thrown is years of silence. Every block is a childhood memory. And when it's over, there's no reconciliation. Just a beat of quiet recognition. That they survived. That they're still standing. Critics who praised the film saw this moment as its emotional apex, a raw, unspoken acknowledgement of brotherhood. Those who were less kind saw it as melodrama, a twist inserted for effect. But few denied its impact. Because it reframed the story once again, not as a tale of justice, but of survival. Audience reactions painted a different picture entirely. Where critics hesitated, viewers leaned in. The film struck a chord with people who saw themselves in Christian. Audience reactions painted a different picture entirely. Where critics hesitated, viewers leaned in. The film struck a chord with people who saw themselves in Christian. People who understood what it felt like to navigate a world that doesn't accommodate difference. Forums, blogs, message boards, filled with voices saying things like, "This is the first time I saw someone like me on screen," or "He's not perfect, but he's real." One moment that resonated deeply was the scene where Christian tells Dana that he likes her painting. It's not a grand declaration. Not a flirtation. Just a quiet compliment. Honest. Raw. And when she blushes, unsure how to respond, he simply says, "It's a nice painting." It's a simple interaction, but it holds volumes. Critics noted that scene as one of the most authentic depictions of autistic connection in mainstream cinema. Not dramatized. Just real. The film's exploration of morality also drew critical attention. Christian works for bad people. Cartels. Dictators. But he also holds a strict code. He finishes what he starts. He protects those who can't protect themselves. He donates to causes that support children with autism. His actions are guided by a logic that makes sense to him, even if it defies the expectations of law or order. And that ambiguity, those shades of gray, are what gave the film its staying power. In a genre that often demands clear heroes and villains, it refused to comply. Christian isn't a hero. He's not even anti-hero in the traditional sense. He's something else. A man with a specific set of tools, using them as best he can. To right wrongs. To stay balanced. To survive. Critics debated whether the film succeeded in its balancing act, between authenticity and fantasy, between action and introspection. But few denied that it tried something different. Something harder. It wasn't just about what the film was. It was about what it refused to be. One reviewer summed it up like this: "This is a movie that gives you a man who can shoot the wings off a fly from a mile away, but who still flinches at the touch of another person." And instead of mocking that, or fixing it, the film just lets it be. That's rare. That's beautiful. Ultimately, the film's legacy isn't measured in awards. It didn't sweep the Oscars. It wasn't designed to. But it endured. In conversation. In connection. It prompted viewers to ask deeper questions, not just about the character on screen, but about the world we live in. What does it mean to be different? Who gets to be strong? And what do we miss when we look only at the surface? The story doesn't end with an explosion. It ends with movement. A trailer pulling away. A child in a specialized school. A donation made anonymously. A painting returned to a museum. No fanfare. Just quiet acts of balance. And in that stillness, in that choice to do good, not for praise but because it's right, the film delivers its final message. That power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it calculates. And sometimes it listens. It always starts in a room. A few lights. A long table. Notes scattered across pages, some typed, some scribbled in margins. The idea seems simple at first. What if a math genius worked for the world's most dangerous criminals? But it doesn't stay simple for long. Because as they start shaping the story, the director, the writers, the producers, everyone realizes they're not just telling a story about numbers. They're telling one about solitude. About structure. About a man who doesn't fit into the world but still finds a way to move through it with purpose. And so the groundwork begins. Behind The Accountant was a team that knew they had something that couldn't be approached like a typical action film. Director Gavin O'Connor, known for his work on Warrior, wasn't interested in flashy spectacle for the sake of entertainment. He wanted character. Texture. A pulse that beat just beneath the surface. From the beginning, the film was shaped not by adrenaline but by contrast. Moments of quiet interrupted by sudden, shocking violence. And for that to work, the production had to reflect that same balance behind the camera. Ben Affleck came into the role with an unusual intensity. He wasn't just signing up for a gunslinging anti-hero. He was portraying a character on the autism spectrum, with layers of emotional complexity, behavioral nuance, and childhood trauma. To prepare, Affleck dove headfirst into research. He met with psychologists, observed therapy sessions, studied the routines of individuals with similar profiles to Christian Wolff. But he didn't want to mimic. He didn't want to imitate or overperform. Instead, he aimed for subtlety, quiet patterns, repeated gestures, a specific cadence of speech that reflected thought before expression. What many people don't know is that Affleck worked with an on-set coach whose job was solely to keep him anchored in Christian's world. Between takes, she would pull him aside, not to redirect lines or correct emotion, but to recalibrate posture. Remind him to avoid eye contact, to fix his sleeves, to repeat calming gestures with his fingers. These weren't scripted. They were layers of reality woven into the performance. And they weren't easy to maintain. One of the biggest challenges during filming was rhythm. The film lives and breathes through its timing. Pauses, silences, delayed responses. The editing had to respect that. The director and editor, Michael J. Duthie, worked closely to preserve the integrity of those moments. Instead of cutting quickly to keep momentum, they often let scenes linger. Sometimes that meant holding a frame a beat too long, letting the discomfort hang. Those were the takes they used. Not the cleanest but the most honest. The action sequences, on the other hand, were anything but hesitant. Fight choreography was led by Walter Garcia, who took inspiration from military close combat systems and Southeast Asian martial arts, particularly Silat, a style built around fast, lethal efficiency. The goal was to reflect Christian's personality through movement. Clean. No wasted effort. Just like his accounting. If he could neutralize a threat in 2 moves, he wouldn't use 3. Ben Affleck trained 6 days a week for over 3 months to prepare. And this wasn't just about building muscle. It was about muscle memory. He drilled each technique hundreds of times until his body could move on instinct. On set, when it came time to shoot the warehouse scene, one of the most brutal in the film, Affleck performed the sequence nearly in full, with minimal use of doubles. The crew often said you could tell when he became Christian mid-take. His posture changed. His breathing slowed. And his voice, measured, robotic in its evenness, cut through the room like static. But the production wasn't all intensity and silence. There were strange, even comical, moments of levity that the cast and crew still remember. Like the time Affleck tried to do math problems between takes, yes, real ones, insisting it helped him stay in character. A crew member caught him scribbling long division into the margins of the script. Or the day J.K. Simmons showed up with a portable speaker and started blasting jazz in between takes to loosen up the IRS vibe. One particularly memorable anecdote involves Anna Kendrick, who played Dana, the junior accountant who stumbles into Christian's secret. Her scenes with Affleck were meant to carry quiet emotional tension, 2 people trying to understand each other without really having the language. To help create that atmosphere, Kendrick and Affleck barely rehearsed together. O'Connor believed that their real-life awkwardness would feed the authenticity of their characters' dynamic. It worked. Kendrick, known for her comedic timing, often tried to make Affleck laugh between takes. She once said in an interview that making him break character was like trying to tickle a statue. But one day, she slipped a joke into a take, completely off script, and he cracked. Just barely. The camera caught a flicker of a smile before he shut it down. It didn't make the final cut, but the crew still talks about the time Christian almost laughed. Visually, the film was designed to reflect symmetry and imbalance all at once. Cinematographer Seamus McGarvey opted for clean, composed frames that often isolated Christian in wide shots, placing him at the center of a world that never quite closes around him. Color palettes shifted depending on the setting. Cool blues and grays for the robotics company, warm neutrals and dim lighting for Christian's home and trailer. The intention was to highlight his dual life, not with flash, but with subtle dissonance. Speaking of the trailer, that steel, unassuming cube tucked away in a storage facility was an actual, functioning set built to reflect Christian's mind. Everything was labeled, measured, lined up. The production designer, Keith Cunningham, revealed that they brought in consultants from military storage units to make the hidden compartments feel authentic. Every shelf, drawer, and lock had a purpose. The trailer wasn't just a base of operations. It was Christian's brain, externalized. One prop that fascinated the crew was the original Action Comics #1, placed in a protective case inside the trailer. It wasn't just there for decoration. It was symbolic. Clark Kent, the socially awkward accountant type hiding a powerful alter ego. A metaphor for Christian himself. Affleck, a lifelong comic book fan, reportedly lobbied for that specific inclusion. He wanted that Easter egg not as a wink, but as a quiet piece of truth. The film's score, composed by Mark Isham, was another layer of precision. Isham created a soundscape that mimicked Christian's processing of the world. The music didn't follow traditional emotional cues. Instead, it used minimalist piano motifs and layered strings to reflect internal rhythms, like the clicking of an abacus or the turning of a page. Isham even used manipulated percussive sounds that were built from real calculator clicks and cash register noises. The result was a score that didn't lead the emotion but hinted at it, just like Christian himself. Production took place primarily in Atlanta and Georgia suburbs. Interestingly, the house used for Christian's childhood flashbacks was located on a quiet street just outside of Marietta. Locals were told it was a small indie film. One homeowner later joked they didn't realize they were living next to an international assassin with a pencil fixation. The real surprise came in the post-production phase. Originally, the film had a more traditional ending. The villain was stopped, the secrets were buried, and Christian drove off into the distance. But O'Connor and the writers felt something was missing. The emotional payoff wasn't strong enough. So they rewrote and res-hot the final scenes with a tighter focus on Christian's silent gifts, a donation to the school, a painting returned, the possibility of change without the need for fanfare. It gave the story not just resolution, but resonance. When test audiences first saw the finished version, the reaction was unlike what Warner Brothers expected. People weren't just talking about the action or the twists. They were talking about him. About Christian. About how they related to his struggle to connect, to cope, to function in a world that never made space for his kind of mind. The feedback was so unexpected and so passionate that the studio quietly expanded the release. Even among the cast, there was a sense that they had created something with a strange sort of heartbeat. Not perfect, not easy, but honest. John Bernthal, who played Braxton, said in interviews that he'd never felt more conflicted about a role. "I'm supposed to be the guy you hate," he said, "but the whole time I'm just thinking, this is my little brother. This is the kid I trained with, bled with. We're not enemies. We're just broken in different ways." Their final fight scene was rehearsed over and over, not just for the stunts, but for the silences. The moments between hits. The years between words. In the end, the production of The Accountant mirrored the story it was telling. Precise. Obsessive. Built with care. And like Christian Wolfe himself, it didn't scream for attention. It didn't need to. It just did the work, quietly, methodically. And when the dust settled, it left behind something rare. Not just a film, but a blueprint of what it looks like when people take time, when they listen, when they trust that even in the silence, there's something worth hearing. It begins in quiet. No grand vistas. No sweeping landscapes drenched in golden light. Just space, symmetry, silence, and a man walking through it, alone. This isn't a story told through spectacle. It's told through absence, through stillness, through a palette of grays and soft blues, harsh fluorescence, flickering shadows. The kind of world that feels sterile on the surface, but if you listen closely, hums with unspoken weight beneath it. From the very first frame, the setting is not just a backdrop, it's an extension of the main character's mind. Controlled, compartmentalized, and heavy with the tension of what remains unsaid. The primary location, Christian Wolfe's office, is our first clue. It sits tucked away in an unremarkable strip mall, between a nail salon and a laundromat. From the outside, it's practically invisible. A place you pass without a second glance. But that's the point. The setting tells you who he is before he ever speaks. He doesn't want to be seen. Doesn't want to be remembered. Even the office name, ZZZ Accounting, suggests camouflage, hiding in plain sight. Inside, the room is cold and neat. No photographs, no clutter. Just ledgers, calculators, pencils sharpened to perfect points. There's no warmth, no comfort, only function. And yet, the silence of the space speaks louder than dialogue. It tells us this man is not normal, not in the way the world expects. But he is precise. He is efficient. He has built his environment like a machine, where every piece serves a purpose. The cinematography matches this intention. The camera lingers in wide, unbroken takes. Framing is centered, balanced, unflinching. The lens doesn't chase action. It waits. It observes. Just like Christian. And yet, the silence of the space speaks louder than dialogue. It tells us this man is not normal, not in the way the world expects. But he is precise. He is efficient. He has built his environment like a machine, where every piece serves a purpose. The cinematography matches this intention. The camera lingers in wide, unbroken takes. Framing is centered, balanced, unflinching. The lens doesn't chase action. It waits. It observes. Just like Christian. But this isn't the only place he operates. We're soon introduced to his trailer, a mobile fortress hidden inside a nondescript storage unit, revealed only when steel doors slide open like a vault. The moment the camera steps inside, the atmosphere shifts. Here, color becomes softer, richer. Not warm, but less sterile. There are secrets here. Lined along the walls, original art, military-grade weapons, untraceable currency, and a single twin bed in the corner. It's both a sanctuary and a battlefield. A room of contradictions. Beauty and brutality side by side. Production designers constructed the trailer to feel like the interior of his mind, organized chaos. Every object is meticulously placed. The Monet painting that hangs above his desk? A reminder of what he longs to feel. The Renoir? A whisper of connection. And the original Action Comics #1? A mirror. A symbol of dual identity. Like Superman, Christian is both mild-mannered and mythic. Both protector and predator. And his space reflects that. But perhaps the most haunting setting is the past. In fragmented flashbacks, we see the military base where Christian was raised. The camera here becomes more handheld, less stable. Lighting is stark, almost punishing. The halls are lined with glass and shadow. Everything feels cold, not because of the temperature, but because of the absence of safety. These flashbacks are purposefully disjointed, fragments of pain that bleed into the present. They don't explain him. They show what shaped him. A childhood spent learning to fight, not to feel. A home that trained discipline, not comfort. And the cinematography shifts accordingly. Edges sharper, cuts quicker, framing tighter. Then there's the Office of Living Robotics, the high-tech corporation that hires Christian to clean their books. From the moment we step into its towering glass lobby, the contrast is immediate. Everything gleams. Everything smiles. But there's a hollowness beneath the polish. The offices are flooded with artificial light. Hallways stretch endlessly. People speak in hushed tones, unsure of what they're really working toward. The production team designed this space with intention. Clean lines, colorless palettes, oversized conference rooms that dwarf the characters. It's meant to feel oppressive in its openness. Christian fits here intellectually, but not emotionally. He walks through these sterile corridors like a foreign body in a host that doesn't recognize him. And the camera doesn't try to make it warmer. It keeps its distance, reinforcing his isolation. Dana, by contrast, breathes color into these spaces. Her desk has warmth, potted plants, personal touches. She's a presence that quietly disrupts the cold. And in their brief scenes together, the lighting subtly shifts, softer key lights, warmer tones. Not romantic, just human. Another striking setting, the Treasury Department. It's not flashy. No dimly lit surveillance rooms. No high-tech gadgetry. Just paperwork, monitors, and the low hum of fluorescent bulbs. Here, Medina and King work in the background, chasing Christian's trail. The spaces feel suffocating, not because of danger, but because of bureaucracy. The cinematography makes the hallways feel narrow, the walls too close. The light here is pale and unforgiving. You get the sense that no one truly rests in this space. It's where people are ground down by systems. It mirrors a world of rules, but not justice. But the film isn't afraid to shift tone through setting. The farmhouse sequence, for example, set in a more rural, weathered location, is intentionally designed as a decoy. It lulls the viewer. The warm tones, the natural light, the creaking wood floors, all suggest peace. But that's what makes the violence that follows so jarring. When Christian is attacked, the silence of the setting is shattered. The sudden violence in this calm, pastoral space creates dissonance. It's a reminder that he is never truly safe, even in places that look like they should offer refuge. As we approach the climax, the warehouse setting comes into play. A vast, industrial space filled with shadows and scaffolding. It's a space without identity, perfect for a final confrontation. Here, the lighting becomes almost noir-like. High contrast. Deep blacks. Gunfire becomes flashbulbs. Movement becomes silhouette. And in this space, Christian moves like a phantom. The cinematography follows him with surgical precision. No shaky cam, no chaotic angles. Each shot is measured, like the man himself. When he finally confronts Braxton, his brother, the warehouse becomes more than a battleground. It becomes a confessional. Each echo, each blow, is a sentence in a conversation neither of them knew how to have in words. What's interesting is that, throughout the film, Christian is almost always framed alone. Even in crowded scenes, he's isolated. The camera often uses over-the-shoulder shots to keep us inside his perspective but at a distance from others. The filmmakers leaned on long lenses to compress space, making the world feel closer than it is. He's surrounded by people but rarely among them. When characters do enter his space, Dana, Braxton, even King, they are often shot from slightly lower angles, subtly establishing Christian's perception of them as unpredictable elements. Threats. Or possibilities. Color, too, plays a quiet role. Christian's world is dominated by neutral tones, grays, blacks, muted blues. Color only bursts through in small, symbolic ways. The crimson of blood. The gold of a sunrise. The gentle yellow of Dana's blouse. These are choices, not accidents. They reflect what draws his attention. Not fashion, not chaos, but signals. Warnings. Anchors. Visual cues that shape how he moves. One of the most telling uses of color and light happens in the scene where Christian visits Harbor Neuroscience, the autism center he donates to anonymously. The lighting there is soft. The color temperature is warm. The children are surrounded by light, activity, care. Christian stands in the doorway, watching a young boy like him engage with a therapist. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move forward. But the look on his face, just a flicker, is a rare moment of peace. The camera pulls back slowly, framing him in the doorway. Half in shadow, half in light. That's the story in one shot. And then, of course, there's movement. The way Christian drives. The way he walks. The way he sits. All of it choreographed with exactitude. And the camera reflects that. Rarely handheld. Often on tracks or cranes. Smooth movement. Predictable paths. The film resists chaos in its framing until chaos arrives in the story. Only then do things shake. Only then does the lens break its line. The world of this film is not designed to dazzle. It's designed to feel off. Too quiet. Too still. Too wide or too tight. Viewers don't always notice it consciously. But they feel it. They feel the tension of being in a space that doesn't quite settle. And that's the brilliance of the setting. It reflects Christian's interior world so completely that even the audience begins to live within it. In the final scenes, the camera lets go a little. Christian has survived. He's moving again. The trailer is on the road. A painting is returned. A donation made. And the light changes. Just slightly. The sky is brighter. The colors richer. Not dramatically. Not sentimentally. Just enough to suggest a shift. A beginning. It's a film built on silence, but shaped by space. A story not told through grand speeches or sweeping landscapes, but through the narrow corridor of a man's mind, and the wide, empty rooms he walks through, trying to make sense of it all. And in every frame, every shadow, every unspoken moment, the world around him whispers one thing. You're different. But not broken. The atmosphere on set was never what you'd expect from a high-concept action thriller. It wasn't thunderous with shouting or chaos, wasn't riddled with egos jostling for attention or cameras flying like bullets through crowded sets. Instead, it felt intentional, quiet, focused, much like the man at the center of the story it was telling. From the very first day of production, the tone was set not by the script or the director's shout through a megaphone, but by the character himself, by Christian Wolfe. Ben Affleck, stepping into the shoes of this paradoxical character, walked onto set not with the bombast of a movie star, but with the careful, unassuming precision of a man who'd already spent months trying to live inside a very particular kind of mind. And it changed everything. Affleck was not just showing up to hit marks and deliver lines. He'd taken the role personally. This was not the Batman swagger, not the charming boy next door of his earlier roles. This was something more interior, more architectural. He arrived with notebooks, rehearsed in isolation, repeated scenes dozens of times, not to refine emotion, but to reduce it. He wanted Christian's moments of expression to feel earned, not performed. But while his performance was reserved, the environment around it often wasn't. In between scenes, the crew affectionately called him the Machine. Not because he was distant, but because of how locked in he was. Cinematographer Seamus McGarvey once joked that it was eerie watching Affleck switch in and out of character. One moment he'd be cracking a dad joke with a lighting tech, the next moment, staring blankly at a whiteboard full of numbers with that glazed, analytical stare, fingers twitching in tiny, rhythmic pulses. To help ground the performance, the production brought on consultants from the autism community. Doctors, therapists, educators, who worked closely with Affleck to make sure Christian's behaviors weren't generic or overblown. One such consultant, a behavioral therapist from Atlanta, even shadowed scenes and gave input on things like eye movement, reaction time, and repetitive motion. There was a day, during the shooting of a simple kitchen scene, when Affleck paused just before the cameras rolled. He stepped aside, whispered something to the consultant, then walked back in and slightly adjusted how he picked up a cup of water, switching hands, straightening the glass after setting it down. That tiny, unnoticed movement made it into the final cut. Director Gavin encouraged this kind of granular detail. He wasn't interested in speed. He was interested in truth. Known for his character-driven work in films like Warrior, O'Connor brought the same approach here. He spent more time on blocking than on coverage. Less focus on camera tricks, more on stillness and emotional geometry. Actors weren't told to feel more, but to do less. The power of the film, O'Connor believed, lay in the spaces between. But that didn't mean everything was solemn. There was a very real contrast between the gravity of what was unfolding on camera and the humanity of what was happening off it. Anna Kendrick, with her trademark sarcasm and sunny wit, became the unofficial spirit lifter on set. Though her role was more grounded and serious than audiences were used to seeing from her, off-camera she kept the crew laughing. At one point during a long night shoot, she organized an impromptu game of charades between takes. The subject? Movie accountants. The results were absurd, and included a hilariously bad attempt at Moneyball. Her chemistry with Affleck was, in many ways, built through those off-screen contrasts. Kendrick would often deliberately improvise small reactions during scenes, eyebrow raises, muttered asides, just to see if she could break his concentration. According to the crew, it almost never worked. Until one day, during a scene where Dana nervously stumbles over her words, Kendrick flubbed her line in a very un-Dana way and threw in a deadpan, nailed it under her breath. For just a second, Affleck cracked. A micro-smile. The editor called it the ghost of a grin, and they kept it. Then there was John Bernthal. The intensity he brought to the role of Braxton wasn't a front. He arrived to set already emotionally charged, having spent weeks prepping not just his physicality. He trained daily in mixed martial arts, but also the layers of conflict between his character and Christian. Bernthal and Affleck rarely rehearsed their scenes together. This was deliberate. O'Connor wanted their on-screen tension to reflect the real emotional uncertainty between them. When it came time to shoot the final warehouse fight scene, the two actors had rehearsed the choreography separately, and only brought it together the day of shooting. The result? Raw, unscripted energy. Their blows landed harder. Their breath was real. In one take, Affleck's block came a second too late and Bernthal's punch clipped his cheekbone. Shooting paused. Affleck waved it off. Bernthal apologized, but Affleck just nodded. "We'll use that one." They did. That scene, the showdown between brothers, was the most complex to shoot. It took 5 days, with a rotating camera team and stunt doubles on standby. But Affleck and Bernthal insisted on doing as much as they could themselves. The space they fought in, an echoing warehouse, dimly lit with shafts of cold light, was kept deliberately cold. Unforgiving, the set designer called it. So by the end of every day, the actors were physically and emotionally spent. Crew members reported that Bernthal didn't speak much between takes. He'd find a corner, towel off, and stay in that simmering state. But when the cameras weren't rolling, there were unexpected moments of levity. J.K. Simmons, as Ray King, brought his own kind of fire to the set. With his booming voice and dry humor, he often lightened the mood during long dialogue scenes. In one memorable instance, after flubbing a line for the 3rd time, he turned to the crew and said, "I swear, if I win another Oscar, it's going to be for nailing exposition." The room erupted. Simmons also ad-libbed more than people realized. Many of his characters' monologues were loosely structured, allowing him to inject frustration or weariness depending on the take. During one scene with Cynthia Addai Robinson's Medina, he improvised a line about trying to catch a calculator-wielding ghost. It wasn't in the script, but it stayed. On the production side, the biggest challenge was pacing. O'Connor and his team were determined to keep the film's deliberate tempo, resisting studio pressure to make it feel faster. That meant long conversations in editing rooms, debating which shots to trim and which silences to keep. There's a moment in the film where Christian pauses, mid-sentence, mid-thought, and the pause lasts 4 seconds. It's uncomfortable and purposeful. Studio notes suggested cutting it. The director fought to keep it. That fight mattered. Because those pauses became part of the character's heartbeat. They weren't gaps, they were truths. One surprising production story involved the filming of the storage unit scenes. The location they used was an actual, functioning storage facility. It had to be partially shut down for 2 weeks. But they kept one row open, just far enough from Christian's trailer set, to keep the company's insurance intact. The owner of the unit 2 spaces down was an elderly man storing vintage baseball cards. He didn't realize what was being filmed next door until he wandered onto set one afternoon looking for his key. According to the crew, he looked around at the cameras, the crew, the props, and asked Affleck, "You're not one of them Hollywood fellas, are you?" Affleck smiled and said, "Not today." The man never left his unit unlocked again. When the shoot wrapped, the crew had a quiet wrap party, fitting for the tone of the film. No fanfare. Just a rented restaurant, low music, and handshakes. Affleck gave a brief, unscripted speech. He didn't talk about numbers or box office projections. He thanked the consultants, the crew, and the people who helped him understand what it means to live differently in a world that demands sameness. Because for all its action and sharpness, this wasn't a film about violence. It was about loneliness. About coping. About constructing a world that feels manageable in the face of overwhelming noise. And behind the camera, the people telling that story treated it with the same care and weight. They rehearsed not for perfection, but for honesty. They lit scenes not for beauty, but for balance. And they spoke, when they did, in tones just loud enough to be heard over the silence. Because sometimes the most unforgettable stories are the ones where nothing is shouted, only understood. It's not a story that begins with fire. It doesn't storm through city streets or roar with declarations. Instead, it starts in silence. In stillness. A boy at a table, scribbling numbers in perfect order while chaos unfolds around him. The other children scream, cry, spin. But he's calm, focused, already building a world he can understand, because the one outside is far too loud. That's where the film begins, not with a bang, but with a child's desperate search for control. And from that very first frame, it begins weaving its core theme, soft but unrelenting, the tension between order and chaos. Christian Wolff is a man sculpted from numbers. Everything about him, his rituals, his habits, the precise way he arranges objects or chooses his words, screams of someone trying to anchor himself against something invisible. The world, for him, is a storm. Too unpredictable. Too emotional. But numbers, they are constant. They are true. So he clings to them. Not just because he's brilliant, but because they make sense when nothing else does. And that need for structure becomes the heart of the film's thematic pulse. One of the most poignant expressions of this theme lies in Christian's methodical routines. His evening rituals, pouring himself a small glass of water, playing loud music, subjecting himself to strobe lighting, aren't eccentric quirks. They are his way of creating balance, of dulling the world's overwhelming stimulus by drowning it in controlled noise. Critics have called these scenes difficult to watch, but that discomfort is the point. It's not self-torture. It's self-regulation. His body craves chaos, but only chaos he controls. This theme of control bleeds into every frame. Even his profession, accounting, isn't just a job. It's an extension of his soul. He doesn't just crunch numbers. He finds patterns, hidden truths, secrets no one else can see. And in that act, he feels power, purpose. He is a savant not because he wants to be useful to others, but because he must make the world make sense. When Dana hands him the corrupted books from Living Robotics, his entire body seems to align with a new mission: to uncover the lie, to restore balance. Because disorder isn't just troubling for Christian, it's intolerable. But the irony the film keeps circling is that Christian, this man of balance and calculation, was born from chaos. His childhood was war. Not literal, but emotional. A military father who demanded obedience over understanding. Who refused the idea that his son should be treated differently. Who hardened him through fists and fire. And in doing so, created a man who could survive anything, except connection. That brings us to the film's second major theme: isolation versus connection. Christian is a fortress. Every aspect of his life is designed to keep others out. He changes identities. Lives in a trailer hidden inside a storage facility. Doesn't speak unless necessary. His clients don't know his name, and the government can barely trace him. He's everywhere and nowhere. He exists like an equation, solvable, but only if you're given the right variables. But then he meets Dana. She's not like him, not by wiring, not by experience, but she doesn't flinch. She doesn't recoil at his awkwardness or his silence. She meets him halfway. When he compliments her painting, she's taken aback. Not because she thinks it strange, but because no one else had noticed. In their own ways, both are overlooked. Both underestimated. And though their bond never becomes romantic, it hums with something deeper: recognition. Her presence challenges him. She's chaotic, emotionally open, and expressive. And yet, he doesn't retreat. He adjusts. Not fully. Not easily. But enough. He risks exposure to protect her. He allows her into the rigid, symmetrical structure of his world. And in doing so, the film begins to explore the fragile beauty of vulnerability. Symbolism plays quietly here, but deliberately. One of the most striking visual motifs is the abacus. Christian's favorite toy as a child. It's not shown often, but when it is, it becomes a visual shorthand for the only world he truly trusts. The beads slide predictably. The sums always match. It's the first symbol of safety he ever had. And in his adulthood, numbers are his new abacus. Every ledger he balances is an act of survival. Every forensic audit is a way to bring calm to a world spinning too fast. Then there's his trailer, a mobile sanctuary that holds more than secrets. Inside are original masterpieces: Pollock, Renoir, and Action Comics #1. On the surface, they're trophies. Hidden treasures. But look closer and each is a metaphor. Pollock's chaos mirrors the turmoil Christian controls inside himself. Renoir's warmth speaks to the softness he's buried but not lost. And the comic? That's not just nostalgia, it's identity. Superman. The man with a hidden self. An ordinary exterior masking a force no one understands. That's Christian. The idea of duality, of masks and hidden selves, threads itself through the entire film. Christian isn't just a killer and an accountant. He's a protector and a predator. He brings justice through violence. Solves financial puzzles but wields firearms with equal skill. He embodies contradiction. And in doing so, the film raises uncomfortable questions. Can violence be redemptive? Can someone with blood on their hands still be righteous? Can a man so disconnected from emotion still understand right from wrong? The film doesn't answer these questions outright, but it frames them through Christian's actions. He doesn't kill indiscriminately. He doesn't take pleasure in it. Every act of violence is precise, measured, directed only at those who deserve it. When he learns that Dana is in danger, he doesn't hesitate. He doesn't deliver speeches. He moves. Silently. Efficiently. And in that silence lies his morality. He may not cry. He may not scream. But he cares. In his own way, in his own rhythm, he chooses to protect rather than destroy. Another symbol that carries weight is the phone call. Throughout the film, Christian stays connected to a mysterious voice, a woman who guides him through jobs, monitors threats, and offers him logistical advice. We never see her, only hear her. She is calm, analytical, and completely unflappable. But in the final moments, we discover the truth. She is like him. Neurodivergent. Isolated. Managing the world from a safe distance. Their relationship, built on trust without touch, support without presence, is its own kind of love story. Not romantic, but intimate. It speaks to a deeper theme. That connection does not require proximity. That for people like Christian, safety often comes from understanding, not physical closeness. The film's climactic twist, that Braxton, the assassin chasing Christian, is his brother, unlocks yet another thematic layer: family and forgiveness. Braxton is what Christian could have become, driven by rage, by resentment. Raised under the same roof, trained by the same father. But where Christian turned inward, Braxton turned outward. He embraced violence. Became a gun for hire. Yet when they finally face each other, there's no villain monologue. No self-pity. Just fists. Memories. Unspoken grief. And when the fight ends, what remains is not hatred. It's grief. It's recognition. They were both children once. Both wanted the same thing, a place in a world that didn't want them. And that mutual ache, buried beneath decades of separation, becomes the closest they'll ever come to reconciliation. Even the final scenes carry thematic echoes. Christian sends a donation to Harbor Neuroscience, the center that helps children like him. He doesn't sign his name. Doesn't ask for acknowledgement. But he watches. From a distance. A boy not unlike his younger self is getting help. Smiling. Engaging. Progressing. And Christian, standing in the shadows, finally allows himself a moment of rest. It's not redemption. It's continuity. A quiet acknowledgement that while he can't undo his past, he can shape the future for someone else. In the end, the film is not a typical story of good versus evil. It doesn't place its protagonist on a pedestal or drag him into darkness. It sits with him. In silence. In stillness. And it asks us to consider a world where difference is not something to be cured, but understood. Where a man like Christian Wolfe, with his awkward silences and precise violence, isn't a contradiction, but a reflection of what it means to live in a world that doesn't always make space for people who don't fit, and of the strength it takes, not just to survive in that world, but to quietly, methodically, shape it into something better. One number at a time. It doesn't unfold like most thrillers. There's no barrage of quick cuts, no dizzying chase that leaves you gasping for breath. Instead, this story, crafted with near mathematical precision, unravels in calculated increments. Each frame placed like a puzzle piece. Each silence stretched not out of hesitation, but intention. The filmmakers didn't want speed. They wanted structure. And so, from its very first scene to the final quiet departure, the movie moves like its protagonist. Deliberate, methodical, and precise. Director Gavin O'Connor didn't want to make just another action movie. He wanted to create an experience that mirrored the internal world of Christian Wolfe, a man whose life was built on systems, on order, on the necessity of logic. To do that, the entire production had to adopt the same discipline. There was no space for chaos, no tolerance for excess. Every choice, lighting, sound, lens length, color temperature, was selected not because it looked good, but because it meant something. The framing was the first place that precision revealed itself. Working alongside cinematographer Seamus McGarvey, O'Connor decided early on that Christian's world would be symmetrical. Controlled. Balanced. Many of the shots are centered, with Christian placed directly in the middle of the frame. Whether he's walking down a hallway, sitting at a desk, or adjusting the items on his trailer shelves, the camera watches him with clinical clarity. There's no shakiness. No wild movement. Just a steady lens, observing a man who must keep the world exactly aligned. They often used long lenses to compress space, giving scenes a flattened, almost claustrophobic quality. It wasn't about scope, it was about pressure. about capturing how overwhelming the world feels to someone who processes everything too quickly, too deeply. Christian is always surrounded, even when he's alone. That compression in the frame reinforces his internal tension. When the action does erupt, the camera work shifts. Slowly, subtly. Take the warehouse sequence toward the end of the film. As Christian silently picks off armed guards, the camera doesn't shake or lurch. Instead, it follows his movements with eerie smoothness. Steadicam shots glide beside him, as if the camera itself respects his rhythm. The choreography is tight. The cuts are minimal. There's no over-editing. Because Christian isn't chaotic. He's surgical. And the filmmaking honors that. The editing, overseen by Richard Pearson, is another quiet masterclass. Many modern thrillers rely on frenetic cuts, 10 edits in 10 seconds, a blur of motion and sound. But not here. In this film, scenes breathe. When Christian speaks, there are long pauses. When he thinks, the edit holds. The silence isn't uncomfortable, it's revealing. It gives the audience space to lean in, to feel what it's like to sit in stillness. The decision to not cut away too soon is a powerful one. It respects both the character and the audience.